embodied storytelling is a really effective tool for creating cultural change and for opening up empathy around really difficult conversations. And so that's the kind of theoretical brainy background of that I knew that was true because of my research. But then I also knew that my own life experience was such that I spent most of my life not understanding the impact that being adopted had. There's trauma that occurs when we separate children from their mothers, and they spend, I should say, not they, we, because I'm one of those people, spend a lifetime trying to figure out why we feel so lost and confused and why we're always in pain. Rehearsal process, I felt the trauma moving because at this point I was then speaking out loud all of the truths that were living in my body, but I had never said out loud to anybody. Subject, Unmothered, is my way of becoming the subject of my own story and telling the story on my own terms.
Welcome to Prodigal, the podcast, where we discuss inspiring stories of self-discovery and transformation. Join your host, Don Jackson, and his dynamic co-host, Big Sean, as they lead you through captivating conversations, all designed to ignite your spirit and broaden your horizons. Whether you're on a journey of personal growth or simply enjoy staying up to date on the latest in culture, you've made the right choice. Get ready to be inspired, entertained, and enlightened. This is Prodigal, the podcast.
Good evening, and welcome to another episode of Prodigal, the podcast. Hi, I'm your host and my co-host, Big Sean. Big Sean, man, how are you?
Man, what's happening with you? You see, I'm representing them Dallas Stars, since we all the way up in the playoffs.
I sure hope you guys win a season ticket holder and all that good stuff. And,
Black man love hockey.
Oh, this video.
Watch your mouth now. See, there you go. Ain't, when y'all quarterback just dropping out and quitting. Yeah.
Hey, God answer prayer. Bishop, who that took? Bishop, who this? Yeah. No, you did see the smoke coming up.
Oh,
It was those monograph color smokes coming out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and it's going to burn like that until we
Oh,
announce.
Lord.
Thanks,
Okay.
man. Listen, we got a very special guest today.
Yes, we do.
I'm so glad to have her. She have a very life transformation story, journey, and so forth. Liz, how are you?
Hey.
Well,
Yeah,
welcome.
I just got
We're going to jump right into it. Big Sean.
Yes, sir. Are you comfortable with being in a room with two black brothers?
Absolutely. Be here for pleasant.
Oh, well, I'll do that.
I'm not a fragile white lady.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. Well, put the seatbelt on then.
You ain't lying, because we get ready to go fast now.
All right.
As Don said, Dr. DeBetta. So, I understand. I have looked at some of your information and I'm like, wow, look like you got a real story to tell. And I'm interested in hearing more about what is going on with you. I guess we can just jump right in. And you had a project called Unmothered. Will you share a little about that with us?
Yeah. So Unmothered is my award-winning solo show about my experience as an adopted person and a woman. So it explores the intersections of trauma and healing and patriarchy and women's agency and lack of choice in terms of the way that adoption impacts who gets to parent and who doesn't. I wrote it originally as part of my dissertation. I went to a really great program at a really progressive school, Union Institute and University, and they were really forward-thinking and encouraged us to become scholar practitioners and to do work that mattered in the world. When I went to my committee and said, hey, I think I want to write a one-woman show as part of my dissertation, they were like, do it. Right. And then I had to figure out, what it was, because I have a background as a writer and a background as an actor and performer. And I knew that I wanted to take those two things and do something to create theater for social change, right? To take a really difficult story and put it in performance, embodied storytelling is a really effective tool for creating cultural change and for opening up empathy around really difficult conversations. And so that's the kind of theoretical brainy background of that I knew that was true because of my research. But then I also knew that my own life experience was such that I spent most of my life not understanding the impact that being adopted had on me. And I spent most of my life struggling to make sense of who I was. And so writing and performing Unmothered was an opportunity for me to tell my story in my own words and to be really truthful. I'd never
Wow.
express, throughout my childhood and teens. And now it's a really powerful tool for helping other people heal, because what happens when I perform it is that other adopted people always say to me, "You have just said all of the things that I have felt my whole life but could never." And they also tell me that it's the first time that they feel seen, heard, and understood.
Mm, that is deep. I understand what you're saying because I adopted two girls, you know, and that was 30 years ago, but I understand it's still to this day, they have some types of, I guess we'll just call it what it is, traumas about
Yeah.
being detached from the biological mother, although where she was or is in her life ain't about shit. But still, the fact is, these kids were damaged and they
Yes.
still fight every day to get over a unseen roadblock and not knowing what it is that has their brain frozen. And that's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Trauma changes our brains, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our brain chemistry changes. We learn to respond to the memories that our bodies keep recycling. In fact, that's a part of Unmothered. I talk about how it took me many, many years to get to the kind of therapy that helped me to process all the memories that my body just kept recycling and that kept returning in reactions to things instead of in words that I could verbalize to then process through. And it's true, there are a lot of people that for one reason or another are unable to parent. And the only other option is for children to go to other families. But there's trauma that occurs when we separate children from their mothers, and they spend, I should say, not they, we, because I'm one of
Yeah.
those people, spend a lifetime trying to figure out why we feel so lost and confused
What's the
and
missing
why
link?
we're always in pain,
Right.
right?
Right. Wow.
Well, in light
It's,
of that, how did you move that energy from your body? You kept saying you moved it through your body, that you
Yeah.
practice or with therapy and so forth.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've been on a healing journey now for about a decade. And before that, I just to speak about some embodied trauma responses that I now recognize them for what they were and are still sometimes when things we pop up and get activated. But I used to have really debilitating headaches, the way that my muscles were contracted. I was literally trying to hold myself together to protect myself from whatever danger was out there, real or imagined. And one of the ways that I started to move that trauma and process it was in the writing of Unmothered, and I had been writing for years. I started writing secret poems when I was 14 because I had a really smart and insightful teacher and coach who suggested that I start writing as a way of getting my feelings out. The writing became one tool for starting to move some of that trauma, although I didn't realize that's what I was doing until many years later when I was working on my PhD and started doing the research and understood that there was a whole field. And that's what prompted me to write Unmothered, the writing of Unmothered and the filling in the pieces of my story that I didn't know, which is what I call rewriting the truth in the Migrating Toward Wholeness process that I've developed subsequent to Unmothered, is really important for people that don't have access to all of the information about their origins and their life stories and their beginnings. For me, the process of writing parts of my story in a way that helped me create a coherent storyline helped me to start moving some of the trauma. Then a really cool thing happened when I got into the rehearsal process. Once I had finished writing and memorizing Unmothered, which I'm not going to tell you how crazy of an experience that was. 65 pages of text. Woo! Thank you, brain. But once I started to get into the rehearsal process, I felt the trauma moving because at this point, I was then speaking out loud all of the truths that were living in my body, but I had never said out loud to anybody. The show itself is pretty physical. It's movement-based. I felt my joints in a different way, and I felt my muscles aching in ways that I hadn't before. And I knew that that was the trauma moving through my body because of the fact that I was physically going through this embodied storytelling process, and I was speaking these things out loud that I had first committed to paper. That having a background as an actor has also helped me to remember to continue to tap into my breath, right? And return to breathing as a way of managing and processing. And that's another tool that I continually use, even when I'm not performing, is just remembering to breathe.
Awesome. Well, I know the promoter and Don, we were both sitting here thinking the same thing. Are you on Broadway with this, or are you taking this? Where are you going and putting this one-woman show up? Because it sounds like it needs to be out here. So tell us what you're doing with that. And are you looking for some promoters or what?
I took it to the United Solo Theater Festival in 2022, which is in New York, and it's the largest solo theater festival in the world. And that's where I won the award for Best Autobiographical Show. Thank you. Which was super exciting because I was not expecting that. I was just like, this is a project that the world needs to see. And so I'm going to bring it to this stage and do my thing. And since then, I have continued to perform it in various places at conferences. I've done it a couple of times at adoption-related conferences. And I have a partnership with a couple of other adoptees, my friends Sarah and Louise, who are podcast hosts of Adoption, The Making of Me. We have started doing every 6 months a collaborative adoptee weekend where they do a live podcast. They record a live podcast with an invited guest, and then I perform Unmothered, and adoptees and folks who are allies to us and our community come from wherever they are in the world to the location. So we've done it in St. Louis. We just did it in California a couple of months ago, and I would love to actually, one of my dreams was always to be on Broadway. I've been off Broadway, and I've done a lot of film and television, but I would love to have an opportunity to perform it more because more people need to see it.
Right. So is this part of like where your storytelling? Is that what you get into? Okay. And where does the workshops come in? You have a workshop, correct?
Yeah. So
tell us about that.
Sure. So Unmothered, was the first iteration of what is now called Migrating Toward Wholeness. And it was because that was me making myself the subject of my own research so that I could figure out this process of, there are 5 core parts, which are making space to heal, rewriting the truth, expressing the core or primal wound, becoming the subject, and breaking silences. And those 5 core principles are really important because all of those things are things that I did in writing and performing Unmothered. I figured out that I needed to get curious about what was stuck inside of me, right? All of the stories that I hadn't been able to tell. I had to figure out a way to rewrite the truth, right? Rewrite the parts of my story that I didn't know. So that I could express what we call in adoption terms, the primal wound, which is that pre-verbal trauma that happens when you separate babies from their mothers. And it happens before we have language to explain it or express it. And so it gets trapped in the part of the brain that is reptilian and doesn't have language. It just has feelings and reactions. Learning to express what had formerly been inexpressible by putting language to it was really important. And then all of that's about becoming the subject, because in adoption, adoptees are never the subject of their own stories. We're always the object, and we're literally objects to be handed over. In fact, I have a poem in Unmothered, which was part of my Rewriting the Truth bit, where I say I'm a gift. I'm supposed to be a gift, a blessing, God's plan, an answer to a prayer. I swallow myself in order to keep the illusion. The present is too pretty, too perfect, too neat to unwrap. Right?
Right.
And so I had to learn how to become the subject. Mothered is my way of becoming the subject of my own story and telling the story on my own terms. And then ultimately, all of that was about breaking all of these long-held silences around things that I was conditioned not to speak about, either implicitly or explicitly, right? Because of dominant cultural narratives. And so those are the 5 core principles of Migrating Toward Wholeness, which are now the writing workshops and the writing process that I've developed to help people, specifically adoptees, but anybody who has experiences of trauma, to learn to find their own voice and speak truth to power by using those 5 core principles to talk about the things that we've been conditioned to stay silent about in order to find greater wholeness. When I talk about healing, it's called Migrating Toward Wholeness because that's really what it's about for me, the journey toward a greater sense of wholeness by finding myself through figuring out what my story was and that I could speak it and that it was important to be heard. The workshops are about giving other people the same tools to do that in their own lives.
And I'm sitting here thinking about all the people that's listening right now. What would you say to that person?
That I see you and I hear you and I understand you, because you're right. So many of us sit in silence, in pain, because we have all of this shame around what we did or didn't do, or the choices but so many of us feel these deep senses of shame. And I would also want people to know that healing is possible, right? That there are people out there like me who have done the work and have figured out how to feel better. And it's hard work, but it's worth it. And there's people here to listen.
Wow. Yes, you're right. That's amazing. I'm like, who thinks of something like that? How did you come up with that, especially as a dissertation, to get a degree? Oh.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Awesome. So you also act. What are some of the things that you did in your acting career besides your play, your one-man play?
Yeah, so my first degree, my undergraduate degree, is in theater because my dream from the time I was a teenager was to be an actress on Broadway. When I started doing theater at age 14, it was the same time that I started writing. And those 2 creative outlets were things that saved me. I went to college for theater. The day before I graduated college, I got a phone call that I was booked for a national educational tour of a show. And I traveled the country for 3 months right after college with a paid acting job, which I felt pretty good.
Yeah.
At that age, paid up. Hey, look at me.
Yeah. And then look at me. And then I spent a number of years pursuing acting. I was in Seattle for a couple of years and doing some regional theater out there. And then I moved back to New York where I grew up, continued to audition, and then I had to take a break. I had some health issues in my mid to late 20s. And then I returned to acting my divorce in my early 30s. And I was part of a really great theater company that I don't think exists anymore, but the Michael Chekhov Theater Company. It was a beautifully creative time for me because I had this amazing group of fellow actors and creatives who just wanted to play and and do good theater. And so our artistic director was like, you can propose whatever you want. And if you can figure out budgets and help make things work. So I spent a couple of years just doing a ton of really great theater in New York in an off Broadway setting started. And then I got my SAG card as well. And I did a lot of television. In fact, just the other day, one of my friends from high school texted me a screenshot. She was rewatching Law and Order, Criminal Intent. And she was like, look who I saw. And every once in a while, I will get a random text from somebody with a screenshot of some TV thing that I was in 15 years ago. And it's really funny. But yeah, part of my shifting away from performing was due to the fact that I needed something different in my life. I wasn't getting cast in the kind of roles that I wanted to play because my internal experience didn't match what I looked like and what casting directors saw me as. I have always looked about 10 years younger than I actually am, which is not a bad thing. But when I was consistently getting hired to like be bikini girl number 2, instead of like playing actual roles,
Correct.
It stopped being fulfilling for me. And I had to make some sort of come to Jesus with myself. It was actually at the same point in time that I started to realize how much being adopted had affected me and that I had never really looked at that. And then I knew that if I was going to return to performing, it would be on my own terms. And so that's the other, sort of impetus for Unmothered was that I felt it felt important to me to start telling true stories, life stories, stories that could affect the world in some way, instead of continuing to play other people.
I was just getting ready to ask you had some health issues in your 20s and you got divorced in your 30s. When was that possibly? You're still in your 30s. What are you, 32?
No. I'm 48.
You got some good genes going on over there.
I don't know where half of them come from.
Yeah.
You definitely have a life transformation story, and it's just always good to hear how people overcome. And for you to go within, to carry all that within, and then to do your thesis on it, and then turn it into this project, and at the same time writing it, healing yourself, and then performing it and cleansing yourself, then putting together a system by way which you can help others. That's genius.
Yeah.
What you just described is how you manifest.
Yes. Yeah,
What you just described is how you manifest. And I applaud you. Hey, recommend everyone to follow her on all her social media, books. Yeah, I'm correct.
I have one book right now.
And
what's the
what
name
type
of
of
that book?
You do coaching, or is all that just in your curriculum in your workshop, or is it something separate you do with coaching besides your curriculum?
Yeah.
In the workshop.
The title of my book is called Adult Adoptees and Writing to Heal.
Okay.
And you can get it on Amazon.
Okay.
Adult Adoptees and Writing to Heal, Migrating Toward Wholeness.
Okay.
And then it lays out all of the 5 core principles that I just talked about that are part of the workshops, and also provides writing activities at the end of each chapter to give folks an opportunity to start exploring some of the Migrating Toward Wholeness process on their own. The coaching that I do is similar to the workshops, but the workshops tend to be self-contained. They're generally a 6-week program that folks can choose to take. And then I also do individual coaching and family coaching. Right now, the couple folks that I'm working with, I'm coaching someone on writing a memoir using the Migrating Toward Wholeness process that I've described to help her to develop the material for the memoir. And then we'll figure out how to structure that story when she does some writing. I'm working with another person on developing a therapeutic journal for adoptees. So that's sort of one lane of coaching that I do, is if folks want to write a book or tell a story, I can help them get there. But then I also do individual Migrating Toward Wholeness coaching, which is a customized program that takes the 5 core principles that I've just described, and I develop a plan for working with folks for it usually takes 3 to 4 months. I can do that with individuals and with families to help them to create deeper connections to themselves by figuring out what their stories are and how they can use the process to create better dialogues.
Couple of questions I always like to ask our guests. What is life? And what does God power means to you?
Yeah.
You got milk
But no,
chocolate and a dark chocolate.
I think life is a big journey, and it's certainly been true for me. And I consider myself a spiritual person. And so I do believe there's a higher power in the universe, and there are threads that connect us to this higher energy. And we just have to learn to find them and follow them. And I think that I've been able to do that because of my own healing journey and because of the ways that I've learned to listen to my own intuition, which is connected to that higher power, to be able to then translate that into living my purpose, which is to help other people heal.
So you are a light. You are a beacon of light that's healing the universe. And you don't find too many specialties in this area.
It's true.
I've never heard of it.
I said, you definitely are divine. You're definitely on a divine journey and mission. I know you're in your purpose, because like I said, what you have created is what you have manifested. And that's how source manifests. You followed the telos of your life and ended up here. And everyone has an origin story. That was your origin story. And, I'm not a doctor or biologist or anything, but you explained all that portion well of how that trauma does one. And then, of course, by the time a child is 7, they are hypnotized until the time they're 7. So if they're traumatized as an adoptee, there is a lot of layers and so forth that needs to be worked on. So once again, Doc, we're not going to hold you, but anything you want to really convey to the audience before we let you go?
But hold on, before she does that, you got to understand, remember something, this is the altar call, and that was your story. And now the doors to the church are now open. So you go ahead and you bring them all down here. I'm gonna be over here in the corner collecting the money, right? While you go ahead and.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I always like to mention is my belief that more stories equal more connection, and more connection equals more healing. And healing happens in community. Healing happens when we can find deeper connection to ourselves, and then by extension, deeper connection to other people. And we can't do it alone. And so if anybody's out there and they need support and healing, I hope that they'll reach out to me or to someone else that they know and love and trust to start that journey, because it's possible and you're possible. And I'm proof that we can heal one story at a time.
I think I have some more tools to go and know how to communicate with my daughters a little better, and as a parent, I think my selfishness, my own ego was, well, you spent more years in a good life than you ever did in a bad life. And we got our girls at 2 and 3. And it was traumatizing for us as well. The story that we always said to the kids is, we picked you. You didn't get a chance to pick us. We picked you because you were who we wanted in our lives. And we wanted to be something in your lives. Just say, we've never done this before. Now, if I would ever want kids again, and what about adopting something? I think it'd be better at this time, but I'm just going to sit on the sideline and just watch right now, because I'm not, no more kids.
Anything else, Doctor, before we let you go?
So grateful to have been able to share this time and space with you both and to get to know you both a little bit in the process of this conversation. And I hope that we get to keep talking. And I think we have another episode because what you just said, Sean, about as a parent is a whole nother conversation.
Yes,
right?
it is. Yes.
And I could tell you parts of my story that relate to that, but we'd be here for the next, 3 hours.
Okay.
We'd definitely love to have you back for that conversation. I'm glad you brought that up. That it's something that you want to unpack because that's a whole nother show.
I have a lot to say about that because of my own experience and because of everything that I know from so many people that I work with in the adoption community, how much we need space for these conversations. So I guess that's the thing I want to say in closing is thank you for holding space for this conversation and for welcoming me.
Oh, yeah.
Once again, how can they find you?
They can find me real easy. They can Google Liz DeBetta, and I'm at Dr. Liz DeBetta on all the social medias.
All right. Once again, Doc, we thank you. And like I said, we'll be back for that part 2. You've been listening to Prodigal, the podcast. I'm your host, Don Jackson.
Thank you for tuning in to Prodigal, the podcast. We hope today's episode inspired you to embrace your own journey of self-discovery and transformation. Don't forget to follow us on social media and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Join us again next time as we continue to explore the ever-evolving world of culture with your hosts, Don Jackson and Big Sean. Until then, keep discovering, keep transforming, and keep being the amazing person you are.